Thank you all for your time today. I'm very sorry about the little glitch we had during our live Zoom meeting. We hadn't foreseen that. We haven't had a Zoom meeting since last April on the same channel, so it was very much a surprise to both Dawn and I. But I'm going to start from the beginning of my PowerPoint presentation, and I'm going to put this out on YouTube for everybody to see it. So again, thank you again for your time today, and it's our 2022 Fall Statewide Chapter Meeting. Again, I am Maria Tellier, the Assistant State Director of MUFON in New Mexico, and I am the State Section Director for Doña Ana, Lincoln, and Otero counties. I've been a member of MUFON and a field investigator since 2012. I live in Alamogordo, I work at Holloman Air Force Base, and I manage MUFON's Facebook pages. So before we get on with the presentation, I wanted to talk to the field investigators that are out there regarding final dispositions on case. Especially now that MUFON has asked us to finish out so quickly with the new 10-20-30 rule. It's been discussed a lot by our state directors in our monthly Zoom meetings, which last for hours, and the directors from MUFON, our director of investigation, and the other powers that be over there, they give us a chance to talk about these changes, and they discuss in more detail the changes with us, and they hear our complaints. And believe me, there's a lot of complaints about 10-20-30. Sometimes it really turns into quite a session, but it's always very insightful hearing what other states' issues are and how they manage their programs. Sometimes bigger isn't better. So MUFON headquarters keeps talking about one topic, and they keep hammering it home to us. So I'm going to just assume that that's extremely important, or they wouldn't be spending so much of their time and our time on it. What they've been trying to get us to talk more and to be more consistent with is the difference between unknown and insufficient data. Regarding unknowns, please do not finish a case as an unknown just because you don't have enough information to determine what the object or the event is. I had to think about that myself for quite a while, so I broke it down this way. Think about this. Other than looking at your cases, I don't have enough time to determine, I don't have enough information to determine what it is, so it's unknown to me. I've finished many cases this way, but now I look at it this way. I don't have enough information to determine what it is because the witness was too vague or didn't provide the evidence I need to convince the investigation. When you put the circumstances of the case with that little spin to it, it's easier to see that the final disposition should be insufficient data, not unknown. Here's a couple of frequent examples I run into all the time. I don't have the original video or the original photo, so I can't look at the metadata. That's not unknown. You don't have enough evidence to investigate the file. So you can't say what it is or what it isn't, and you can't even really identify that the witness is the owner of that photo or video. And also, after contacting the witness, I need more information and they just don't respond any further. So if I've made some contact with them and after 2 or 3 attempts, I'll just close that case as information only, and sometimes I just keep my eye on it to see if it comes up again. Per headquarters, MUFON headquarters, don't waste your time with information-only cases. If you try to contact your witness and after a couple of attempts, they just don't get back to you anymore, don't waste your time anymore. You know, unless it's finish the case out short and sweet, call it info only. You know, unless it's something like one of those damn Starlink satellites and you're pretty sure that's what it is, then you can finish it out as IFO, but until then, no, it's info only. Okay, so on with the show. I'm finally going to start my presentation again, and what it is about is the factors that may or may not influence a MUFON report's final disposition in New Mexico. I'm using the 2021 final case dispositions as my examples, and I've displayed them on the Google Earth Pro map to show what the data looks like statewide. And some of the makes it very clear that the Albuquerque area has a lot more detail because that's our most active area, and I've spent a little more time on that. I also put some historical case locations on here and some natural formations that we're probably all very familiar with, just for reference. So again, I didn't use my witnesses' exact case locations because many times where they filed the case from was where they lived, and we keep our witnesses' identities secret. We protect our witnesses' anonymity. The location icons you're going to see is just in a general city area location, and that's where the events did occur, but it's not the witnesses' home locations. And I'm going to say the same thing about the field investigator locations. The big red dots that are on there and the red names are our field investigators. And I wanted to put them on there so everybody could realize just how much territory field investigators cover. You know, we're a very large state, and Don said we have 8 field investigators, and we probably really only have about 6 that are active. So, you know, we have a lot of territory to cover out there. And at the end of my report, after I give you my summary and my summation, what I think factors are, I'm going to show you a little snippet from a case I had in May regarding an orb. And that was photographed using a cell phone camera. And I was going to show everybody how I identified the object, and it's something new that I learned in greater detail, and I just wanted to share it with everybody today, because whether you're an investigator or not, sometimes you get these things in your pictures, and it's kind of nice to know what they are. So just what are the factors that influence the way we investigate a MUFON case in New Mexico, and how do we determine that final outcome, what we call final disposition? So I put a few there for us to discuss, and like I've said before, I'm from the Philadelphia area, and my family searched the skies in PA for years looking for flying saucers. I moved to Connecticut, and I became involved with MUFON, becoming a field investigator in 2012. But the way I investigate a case in New Mexico is very different from the way I ran my investigations in Connecticut. Factors I dealt with on the East Coast with that I don't have here is that the population out there is much greater per square mile. Also, the congestion in general, trees, buildings, background noises, a lot of those things were factors that influenced cases and what our witnesses saw or thought they saw back then. So, you know, also there's a lot more commercial air traffic back east that we have here in New Mexico. So, you know, I tell my friends and family, come to New Mexico, see the big sky, you know, and we were always looking for flying saucers in the sky back east, but boy, the sky out here is really so wonderful, and sometimes you just don't hear anything, and that's really wondrous. So and there's much more military presence out here, and there's a lot more natural formations. And there's a lot more UFO case history out here, you know, Roswell, Socorro, Holloman, White Sands Missile Range. So here are the 2021 cases that we're going to discuss today and put on the map. You know, enough of me going down memory lane about back east, but these are the 81 cases from 2021 that were assigned to New Mexico field investigators, and all of them were closed. I'm going to use these cases for reference on my maps today, but mostly we're going to discuss those top 2, the 35 identifiables and the 19 unknowns. Most of these were aerial phenomenon that the witnesses reported, you know, in those big New Mexico skies. The Starlink reports, the 11 Starlink reports from 2021 are included in that 35 IFOs. So thank God that the Starlink reports have just about stopped in 2022 because they have dimmed the lights when they get up into their final orbit. You still have to deal with them once they're launched. And there was a launch on August 19th from Cape Canaveral, putting yet more Starlink satellites into orbit. And they were pretty much visible for most of New Mexico. I watched them myself for 2 days, the 19th and the 20th of August, from my back porch. They soared right above the Sacramento mountains around between 8 and 9 o'clock both evenings. So also to that third disposition, info only, there were 17 cases that were info only, and just about every single one of them was that the witness didn't make contact back to us. And we couldn't verify any of the information, so we had to close those out as info only. So it would have been interesting to know if we would have had a chance to investigate those, just exactly where they would have shook out finally. And these are the little pins and graphics that I use to make my point on the maps. Some of them aren't exactly the same because Google Earth Pro uses different icons, but they're extremely close, and I think everyone's going to figure it out. You know, in 2020 and 2021, our witnesses were seeing chains or trains of lights or fleets of UFOs flying across the sky in single file. Now they all see Tic Tacs. So I guess it's a matter of reference. So I want to show you the map. Here is the map with everything on it, and I call it soup to nuts. You can understand it just was very hard to make any kind of determinations in looking at all this mess on these maps. So what I did is, and the colored overlays that you see, or what's called, it's a feature Google Earth has. You can take an item, a JPEG, and you can put it on a map, and you can line it up with anything you want and display it, you know, the way that I have it here. And it was very helpful in some instances, but here it's just very, very busy. So these are the three maps that I'm going to use today in more detail as I discuss each topic. So I narrowed it down to the three styles that you see on there. And mostly we're going to use that first one, the terrain map, because it shows the elevations and rivers and whatnot that we all come in contact with every day. As I popped on the roads, it made it very familiar and clear to everyone looking at them that you know exactly where those areas were. And it also gives a good overview of all the environmental factors that can affect what a witness sees or what they think they see. The second map in the middle is the county map. It helped me with population and density in some instances. I didn't use it a lot, but it was interesting, and it also helps you, since us as field investigators, we're assigned counties. It's easy to see that where the field investigators are mostly around those big county locations, because they have the most cases and they have the most density. But that last map, the volcanic map, this is the first time I've ever considered that to be a factor in a case, because just back east we don't have volcanoes, we don't have lava flows, we don't have petroglyphs, and we really don't have the Native American influences in our environment or our case investigations that you have out here in New Mexico. So here's the map I used for the overlay, and I got that from the New Mexico Bureau of Genealogy and Mineral Resources, and some other information I got from the New Mexico Museum of Natural Resources. In April, MUFON had a Zoom state directors meeting. We have these every month, and the state directors and assistant state directors are all invited to attend at will. But the state director from Washington State, Marie Morgan, gave an outstanding presentation where she showed how her state, Washington State, still has substantially more reports known as unknown and unknown activity around volcanic areas of her state, which are still very active. I'm sure all of us remember Mount St. Helens from 1980 that erupted, the major eruption that blew the top off that mountain. Mount St. Helens originally was 9,677 feet, and after the eruption it is now at 8,330 feet, and it still spews lava and ash and smoke from time to time. New Mexico does not have any active volcanoes or active volcanic activity, but it did. Years ago, the last major eruption was a super volcano that covered Rio Arriba, Sandoval, and Los Alamos counties. It was in the Jimenez Mountains, and that was about 1 million years ago. The latest active lava flows were in Grants 3,000 years ago and Carrizozo 5,000 years ago. So this is where we're going to look at if volcanic activity is a factor in New Mexico cases. This is my favorite map. I use it in every PowerPoint presentation. I somehow find a way to get it in there. And this area that you're going to see right here is the volcanic flow of Carrizozo from 5,000 years ago. It's now called the Valley of Fires, and I've trip-tropped through there quite a bit. So I want you to look at that image and all the factors that are around that image that may affect your perception of what goes on in that area. And that first one that I showed was Trinity. That was the 1945 atomic bomb detonation site. Very interesting that it was right there. To the east of the lava flow is Three Rivers petroglyph site. There's 21,000 petroglyphs. They're still finding more of them. But this was to the east of the lava flow. And then that occurred, I'm sorry, between 900 and 1400 AD, which is between 600 and 1100 years ago. So this is a picture that I took in two pictures that I took in Three Rivers Park. You know, Mount Sierra Blanca is one of the most sacred Native American sites in New Mexico. That peak is known by the Navajo people as the Sacred Mountain of the East. And the Mescalero Apache Indian tribe that lives there consider it to be the place where the Creator gave them all life. So, you know, when I looked at these sites, these circles that I kept seeing, the spiral and the circle with the dots around it, most times when I looked up, I was looking at Sierra Blanca. And I'm just going to assume, going out on a limb here, that the individual who carved these items 600, 1100 years ago was standing in the same place I was when he carved them. And I'm pretty sure that when he looked up and what he was carving was something that was flying above Sierra Blanca. You know, most likely a flying object. So here's that map again. I put the roads on it so you can see White Sands National Park down here at the bottom. And there's a lot of factors around the park. The factors being that there's two military ranges. There's two military bases there. There's Holloman Air Force Base, and then over here, that one there, that is White Sands Missile Range, which is run by the Army. And just past White Sands Missile Range is the NASA's Johnson Space Center. And I've spoken to some people who work there. They told me that that's where, more or less, where GPS was invented, which, you know, I was just flabbergasted by that. And the one thing I say to people is, and this thing here, this is the White Sands Missile Range, the area, and if you look at it, there's no cases in it. There's one identifiable that I see, which is right, you know, right around Alamogordo. There's a Starlink satellite down here. You know, you would think there would be a whole lot more unidentifiable flying objects in that area, but it's restricted airspace, and that may explain why there isn't. So going back on here, I'm sorry. Now we're starting up with the cases. Get off of my Carrizozo lava flow there, and I want you to see all the icons on the map. And they identify the final dispositions, you know, from the little box that you see on the right hand side. Those green pins, the IFOs and those stars, those were all identifiable. They were all items that we identified. They were things such as planes, military and domestic. They were also helicopters, and they were balloons. That's what the identifiables were. But the unidentifiables, Those were the flying saucers. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. So we're going to zero in on this side a little bit on Albuquerque. Albuquerque has a lot of reports. The city of Albuquerque had 15 of the 81 total cases. When you throw in Santa Fe and Rio Rancho, that gives you a total of 31% of all the cases in the state of New Mexico, or about 1/3 of them, came from this area. So I looked at them and I said, well, putting the county overlay on it, which you see right here, it just made it a little clearer to me that looking at the Bernalillo County, there was an awful lot going on down in there. So I had to dive into that a little deeper to see, looked at those cases. And of those cases, 7 of those green pins that you see there were reported on May 14th in 2021. And no, they were not Starlink satellites. This is what they were. This red path, this isn't my map. This is somebody else's map. It goes from the east to the northwest, and it went through that very heavily populated area of Bernalillo County. Those 7 green pins were MUFON events that originated from the Fort Sumner weather balloon facility. These were called HASP Fall 2021 Flight 716N, and they were stratospheric balloons that were launched out of the Columbia Scientific Balloon Launch in Fort Sumner on May 14th. They send weather balloons up every day, but it was very, very odd for them to be in the sky as long as this one was. This flight path that you see was visible from every witness's location that reported that event. And, the National Weather Service was even flabbergasted at the amount of time that balloon spent up in the air, which was very long. And, I saw this balloon sighting myself on the news on the morning of the 15th, which really, they talk about a lot of things on the news, but for them to report this, that really was something. So they call that Albuquerque Metro, which is about 189 square miles. It's the most heavily populated or densest populated area, has about 500,000 people live there, which is 25% of the total state population. The major TV outlets, the radio stations, most of them, they're found right there in Albuquerque. And you can see that there's a cluster of reports in this area, not just identifiables, but look at all those question marks. Those are the unidentifiables. So are we to assume that just because Albuquerque Metro has multiple environmental and man-made factors, that's the reason why and contributes to the fact that MUFON gets more reports from this area? I removed a few of the little icons and, looked at the map a little, zeroed in on the map a little closer, and noticed there's a lot of airports and the military installations and the cluster of reports around those. Not just identifiables, but also unknowns around them. So, Albuquerque has airports, military installations, 2 nuclear laboratories, petroglyph sites, and many, many mountainous locations. These factors can all lead to advanced activity in the skies, but the familiarity of the population that live in that environment will make them more likely to report something that's out of the normal, because they're very used to the planes and they're very used to the environmental factors. But when something's out of the ordinary, they don't hesitate to pick up the phone or to go online and report it. So are we to believe that the general population of Albuquerque is more observant than the rest of the state? Or are they just more likely to report the population or report the activity because they have more outlets to do so and they have better Wi-Fi than the rest of us? So I discussed these Albuquerque factors with the 2 field investigators from that area, and their general consensus that it was the airports and the military bases that attracted all this report activity. So MUFON, we do it scientifically, had to test that theory. I wanted to see, you know, why are there more reports of activities in Albuquerque around the airports and the military bases. So using this app, this is a free app called Flight Radar 24. This is what we generally use whenever there's an aerial event that's reported. And this is an example of what historical data looks like. We just plug in the date, we plug in the time, we hit the little button there, and it shows all those little planes flying around and where they're coming from and where they're going to. If you click on one of them, it tells you who owns the plane, what altitude it's flying out, a lot of historical data about it. You can keep drilling down on it and get more information, which was very, very helpful in the identifiables, the IFOs. We were able to take a look at a lot of things and say this is exactly what it was. And this is an example of, if you click on it some more, it shows you the flight path, where that plane started and where it landed, which was also very helpful. But it was very helpful in determining the identifiables, and it was also very helpful in determining the unknowns, because you could very quickly, if the witness saw an item and it didn't show up, didn't show up on this map, it wasn't something that was being tracked by the FAA. All planes tracked by the FAA show up in this app, even military planes. They don't give you as much information, and the call signs for that, by the way, are Nike, like the sneaker, Nike. You have Nike, and it'll have a sign, it'll have a number after it, and that's a Nike flight. But you can click on it like this, and it'll show you that it goes from one military base to another military base, and you can figure it out yourself that that's what it is. So, influence. What are the factors that can influence both the witness and the investigator? But as investigators, we always have to apply scientific theory to our investigative process of all the evidence that is presented to us regarding our cases, and all the evidence that we find regarding our cases. And after looking at that Albuquerque map, I thought it was kind of strange that there are so many reported cases around Kirtland, but not Cannon and Holloman, or Wismar even, for that matter. I did the same exercise by putting those little icons on a map around Alamogordo to see if there was a bunch of IFOs or unknowns clustered around Holloman. My theory didn't pan out very well. There were only 3 cases. 2 IFOs, which were F-16s that I identified using Flight Radar 24, and 1 unknown that was around the Sunspot telescope in the Sacramento Mountains, proving that it was unidentifiable by also using Flight Radar. But these 3 reports aren't what I would consider a cluster, or proof positive that airports and military bases are the main factor statewide. Maybe it's just a substantial factor when you're in the Albuquerque area, but not the only factor. I wanted you to take a look at this map that I used from an old PowerPoint I did regarding June 2019, what I call a mini flap. And I have to say, I am more inclined to agree with this theory than I am the airport theory. And you know, there's an abundance of petroglyph sites throughout the Southwest, not just New Mexico. It's not just here. And on this old map, those blue chevrons are from a website called Norfolk, NUFORC, Norfolk. They take reports, they're call-in reports, they're email reports, but they don't investigate. The yellow pins are the MUFON cases that you can see in there, and the red ones, the red flames, they represent the Three Rivers Petroglyph Site and Sierra Blanca. And I also popped Trinity on there just to see, you know, what was going around there. So when I reviewed these 5 these cases in this mini flap of June, they were all around Route 70, going up through Tularosa and Ruidoso. And every one of those reports Both MUFONs and NUFARCs were from Otero, Lincoln, and Socorro counties on the 6th, the 8th, the 11th, and the 12th of June. They all happened between 9 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. They weren't on the flight radar map. The description by most all of the witnesses was round glowing objects that were observed hovering in and around Three Rivers Park and Mount Sierra Blanca. I had another PowerPoint I did. It was regarding 20 years of MUFON in New Mexico. When I reviewed all those cases, 55 MUFON cases alone were within this 25-mile radius of Sierra Blanca. So in reviewing this data scientifically, my girl, Maureen Morgan, the state director from Washington State, she was right on regarding there being more unknown activity around former volcanic sites. And I think this theory, is really substantiated by looking at this data back from this mini flap and then again using the 20-year summaries. So this is my conclusion. New Mexicans have a rich history going back centuries of recording what they saw in the skies. There are many petroglyph sites around the state, and they tell the stories of what the native New Mexicans were encountering. To record their event, they just picked up a rock and they drew it on another rock and left it for us to see. That was their method of reporting events. So I do wonder, were they recording something that was unknown or identifiable? Or did they know what they were looking at and just marking the occasion? That's not to say that airports, nuclear laboratories, and nuclear waste dumps are not factors in cases, but they're not the only factor in our cases. We have to look at all influences and include those in our investigations throughout the state of New Mexico. So that was my little part of the presentation on factors. I hope everybody enjoyed it. If you have any questions or you want to discuss it further, you can email me or text me. So I'm just going to do a little wrap up for you here. The 2022 cases, as we are right now, this is a different little map. I used, this is a Google map, and it doesn't have the detail Google Earth Pro does. I didn't use it because I couldn't change those little icons. It was quicker and easier to use, but it was didn't show me the detail. Unknowns right now are our leading case disposition, as you can see, but insufficient data is growing because of the 10-20-30 rule of finishing out the case. We discussed final dispositions on our first slide when I started out here and how quickly we're being asked to investigate our cases. There's been some talk in these monthly meetings about going to 20, 30, 40, but who knows? There seems to be a lot of change and upheaval right now, and I expect more changes in the future, but I also hope we get a little more direction and a little more training to go with it. The monthly Zoom meetings with the other state directors is highly insightful, and I just like to sit and listen, and listen and learn is what I call it. So we have a new disposition which is called ERT. So just what is ERT? Is it the new Starlink? MUFON has expanded its experiencer research team and more or less separated these cases from all other investigations. The witness who has a possible ERT experience now has more anonymity and security of their personal investigation information. It's hidden from public view. That was happening with other search engines. They were ever able to pull up some quite personal information, and we had to put a stop to that. So MUFON's ERT investigators are trained specifically to interact with this type of witness with their best interest and well-being in mind first before continuing with the investigation. Our New Mexico field investigator, Russ, up in Farmington, he is a member of the ERT team. And believe me, they keep him very busy with these types of cases, not just from New Mexico, but from Arizona and Colorado also. So I want to go back to my little case that I talked about in the beginning, my little orb. And I want to pass this on to everyone. It's something I learned. You know, just about all of us, including Dawn now, has a cell phone, and we take pictures with them. This is an example. What I'm going to talk about today is an example why you should turn the autofocus off on your phones. My witness gave me permission to share this little story with all of you because you may encounter the same kind of situation. And it's like, have you ever noticed something in a photo? And on that photo, you don't remember seeing it when you took the picture. So originally, my witness wouldn't share the photo with me of this event because her husband didn't want anyone having the rights to use it in media or a press release. He didn't want to see it on Facebook, you know, and MUFON doesn't do that. MUFON doesn't do that, but she was a little uncomfortable, you know, sending me the picture. So we really just discussed it through the opening stages of her investigation. And back on May 7th and 8th, the Holloman Air Force Base presented what was called the Legacy of Liberty Air Show, which was the Air Force Thunderbirds. Many of you have seen this group of F-16s fly in tight formations, and my witness took photos that day of the Thunderbirds as they soared above her head and her family's head. While viewing them the next day, though, she noticed something, and this is how she described it, what you see on the screen, and she didn't see that when she originally took the photo. So, you know, what I did is I Googled, yeah, I did, I Googled orb with dots, and I immediately got this return, orb with dots, PDAF, focus pixels in sun reflection lens flare. And lens flare is a very common when you take photos, especially when you're looking directly at the sun or something that's very hot. All cameras capture lens flare, but usually they look like a white ball. This little blue thing you see here is kind of usually seen with a cell phone. The black box that you see in the center of the screen is showing you what the sensors inside your cell look like. All those little white dots, that's what's showing up on that blue orb. And actually, the blue orb is the lens flare. But actually, there's more white dots around that. You just can't see them because, you know, the picture's taken from such a great distance. But people with really good equipment and software see quickly that it's dots, but we don't always have that. So I met with this witness on the parking lot in Alamogordo. Her and her husband, we met, and she showed me the image on her phone. And after I looked at the image, I was pretty well convinced that's exactly what it was. So I showed her that Metabunk site on the previous slide, and her husband read it, and they agreed. Oh yeah, what they captured was classic lens flare. So I closed the case as an IFO, natural phenomenon, lens flare, due to taking photo in direct sunlight of a very hot F-16 exhaust. So I was getting ready to make this presentation, and I wanted to show this thing, and I thought, boy, it would really be great to have the photo. So I asked my witness, and she sent me the photo. And this is the actual object that she saw above Holloman that day. I blew it up a little bit. You blow it up too much and it disappears. But the original image is on the left, and my superimposed, made it bigger, is on the right. So by taking autofocus off of your cell phones, it's not going to eliminate lens flare, but it's going to greatly reduce it. Because when you have autofocus on, the camera zeroes in and focuses in on what it thinks is the object that you're trying to capture. When you take that autofocus off, you control that a whole lot more. So this is just something I wanted to share today. I hope all of those who didn't know it learned something from it, and all of you that already know it, well, hey, way to go, smarty pants. So, in closing out today, I want to thank all the field investigators. I really do. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all the hard work that you do, all the time that you invest, and all the integrity and detail that you bring to every one of your cases. Thank you so much. We are all volunteers, and we appreciate your time and your efforts as you investigate these MUFON reports. New Mexico is the 5th largest state out there, over 121,000 square miles, but the population is only a little over 2 million. To put that in perspective, Philadelphia almost has 3 million people just in the city of Philadelphia itself. So, I look at that when I investigate population density. I think about that every day when I'm out here, and I am grateful for it every day too. So the lowest elevation of the state is over here in the bottom southeast corner. It's called Red Bluff Lakes, 2,800 feet, and the highest elevation is all the way up here north, almost in Colorado, Wheeler Peak. It's in the Santa Cristo Mountains in the north central. It's over 13,000 feet. So as you can see, our field investigators, which are on this map, have a lot of territory to cover. So again, I put stuff on the Facebook page. I wanted to apologize for not posting as quickly as I could. Facebook is always changing things, and one of the things they changed is I can't post from my cell phone anymore or my tablet. I have to fire up my laptop or my Chromebook in order to just approve a post or just admit somebody as a member of our group. And it's nothing personal, it's just it takes me a while to do that. And again, like I said, I want to thank everybody for their time today. We all are like-minded, I like to think, in some way, and hopefully we will have that MUFON, we'll have, and the rest of us will have that disclosure that we all search for regarding what is flying around in our skies. So let me know what you want to see in the future. Ask any questions you want. You can email me, you can text me, you can put it on the Facebook, anything you want. One of the things that I talk about in Holloman is there's an area called, we call it Secret Squirrels, which is a 704 test group. Got a lot of good stuff out of there, and I hope to have a nice PowerPoint on that someday for y'all that I can share. So thank you for your time today. Thank you for your patience. I'm sorry about Zoom crashing, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation.